Hey there, fellow soil enthusiasts. Welcome back to another deep dive here at Soilsage Chronicles. Today we're tackling one of the most hotly debated questions in the gardening world. Should you go with raised beds or stick with traditional in-ground gardening? I've been wrestling with this question myself for years, and after experimenting with both methods across different properties and soil conditions, I'm ready to share everything I've learned. Whether you're a complete beginner staring at your first patch of yard or a seasoned gardener considering a major garden overhaul, this comparison will help you make the best choice for your unique situation. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty comparison, let's talk about what really matters: your soil. I remember when I first moved to my current property, I was so excited to start planting that I barely glanced at what I was working with. Big mistake. That clay-heavy, poorly draining mess taught me a valuable lesson. Your existing soil conditions should be the primary factor in your decision-making process. In-ground gardening works brilliantly when you're blessed with naturally fertile, well-draining soil that's relatively free of rocks and has good structure. If you can dig a hole easily and the soil crumbles nicely in your hand without turning into a sticky mess or falling apart like sand, you might be a perfect candidate for in-ground beds. Raised beds, on the other hand, become your best friend when you're dealing with challenging conditions. Whether it's heavy clay that turns into concrete when dry, sandy soil that won't hold nutrients, contaminated earth near old buildings, or ground that's simply too rocky to work with, raised beds offer you a fresh start with complete control over your growing medium. Let's be honest about costs, because I've seen too many gardeners get sticker shock when they start pricing out raised bed materials. The upfront investment for raised beds can be substantial, especially if you're going with quality materials like cedar or composite lumber. A single 4x8-foot raised bed with quality wood, hardware, and enough good soil to fill it can easily run $200 to $400 depending on your location and material choices. In-ground gardens, have a much lower barrier to entry. Your main investments are really just soil amendments, some basic tools, and of course, your time. However, this is where long-term thinking becomes crucial. If your native soil needs significant work, you might actually spend years and a fair bit of money on compost, amendments, and soil improvements before you achieve the same growing conditions that a raised bed provides immediately. I've calculated that in my situation the raised beds paid for themselves within 3 seasons through better yields and a reduced need for ongoing soil amendments. Your math will probably be different, but honestly, it's worth doing these calculations based on your specific circumstances. This is where raised beds truly shine, and it's probably the biggest advantage they offer. When you build a raised bed, you're essentially creating a custom growing environment tailored to your plant's needs. You can blend the perfect mixture of compost, quality topsoil, and amendments to create that magical growing medium that really makes plants thrive. I remember the first tomatoes I grew in my raised beds compared to the struggling plants in my native clay soil. It was like comparing race cars to bicycles. The raised bed plants had better root development, more vigorous growth, and honestly, significantly higher yields. In-ground gardening requires you to work with what nature has provided, gradually improving it over time. This can be incredibly rewarding and educational, but, it really does require patience and a different approach. You'll become intimately familiar with your soil's personality, learning to work with its strengths and gradually address its weaknesses through composting, cover cropping, and strategic amendments. Poor drainage kills more plants than most gardeners realize, and this is another area where the choice between raised beds and in-ground planting can make or break your garden's success. Raised beds provide automatic drainage advantages simply by elevating your growing medium above the surrounding grade. Even during heavy rains, excess water can drain away, preventing the root rot that destroys so many garden plants. The improved drainage in raised beds also means your soil warms up faster in spring, extending your growing season on both ends. I typically get my first plantings in 2 to 3 weeks earlier than my neighbors who garden in ground, And this early start makes a huge difference in overall productivity. In-ground gardens can achieve excellent drainage, but it often requires more work up front. You might need to install drainage tiles, create berms, or amend heavy soils with coarse materials to improve water movement. However, once established, in-ground gardens often require less frequent watering because they can tap into natural soil moisture and benefit from capillary action from deeper soil layers. Here's something I wish someone had told me earlier in my gardening journey. Think about how your body will feel in 10 or 20 years. Raised beds typically sit 8 to 24 inches off the ground, which means significantly less bending, kneeling, and back strain during daily garden maintenance. For many gardeners, especially as we age or deal with mobility issues, this accessibility factor becomes paramount. The contained nature of raised beds also makes maintenance more manageable. Weeds are easier to spot and remove, mulching is more straightforward, and you can work systematically through defined spaces. However, raised beds do require more frequent watering because of their improved drainage, and the soil can dry out faster during hot weather. In-ground gardens connect directly with the surrounding ecosystem, which can be both an advantage and a challenge. On the positive side, beneficial soil organisms, earthworms, and mycorrhizal networks can more easily establish themselves. The flip side is that weeds, pests, and diseases can also move more freely through your garden space. Your local climate plays a huge role in determining which approach will serve you better. In colder regions, raised beds offer the advantage of faster soil warming in spring and better cold protection with season extension techniques like row covers or cold frames. The elevated soil mass is easier to insulate and protect. However, in extremely hot climates, raised beds can actually work against you. The elevated, well-draining soil can dry out quickly and may require constant irrigation during peak summer months. In these situations, in-ground gardens that can tap into deeper soil moisture and benefit from the Earth's natural cooling properties might be more practical. After years of experimenting with both approaches, I've come to believe that the best choice depends entirely on your specific situation, goals, and constraints. Start by honestly assessing your soil, budget, physical capabilities, and long-term gardening goals. If you're dealing with poor native soil, have budget flexibility, value convenience, and accessibility, and want immediate results, raised beds are probably your best bet. But if you have decent native soil, enjoy the process of soil improvement, want to garden on a larger scale economically, and don't mind a more gradual approach to garden development, in-ground gardening might be perfect for you. Remember, this doesn't have to be an either-or decision. Many successful gardeners, myself included, use both approaches strategically throughout their garden space, choosing the method that best fits each area's specific conditions and intended use. The most important thing is to start gardening, learn from your experiences, and adjust your approach as you gain knowledge and confidence. Every garden is a unique ecosystem, and finding what works best for your situation is part of the exciting journey of becoming a more skilled and intuitive gardener. Ready to take your gardening knowledge to the next level? Subscribe to Soilsage Chronicles for more in-depth gardening insights, and don't forget to share this article with fellow gardeners who might be wrestling with this same decision. What approach have you chosen for your garden? Drop a comment and let me know about your experiences. I love hearing from our gardening community.